Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author, Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Eliza Jane Brazier. Eliza is an author, screenwriter, and journalist. Eliza entered the horse world at the age of 5 and has worked as a writer, horse trainer, and riding instructor. She currently lives in California with her horse and dogs, where she's developing her books for television. Welcome, Eliza.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It's kind of scary though when you say there's 4 million listens or whatever. Like,
right.
Wait a minute.
Well, right. I don't know if everyone's tuned in, but I hope hopefully a lot of them, because this is such a fun book. I love this. And I know only enough about horses from like dude ranches and camp to be dangerous, but it was really fun to get into this whole world of horses and horse owners and all, it's a crazy clan. So tell our listeners about Girls and Their Horses.
Okay, well, so Girls and Their Horses is the story of a mother who is looking to connect with her daughters through their shared love of horses, right? And they move to this elite community in Southern California, and they dive into the sort of all-consuming horse world with like egotistical trainers. There's like cliquey mean girls, like competitive mothers. And just as they're drawn deeper into this really like enigmatic world, it becomes more and more clear that someone is headed for tragedy. Dun, 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 dun.
I love it. And there is, so first of all, there's so many fun things about this, but let's talk about your experience, because you've been riding horses since 5. And I kind of want to hear, like, is it a family thing that you got, into this? Was it, is everybody in your family horse riders? But I'm also curious about what it was like. I'm also curious about what it's like in this world, because is it like this? I mean, not everybody, but
no. I mean, this is like, okay, the horse world is like, there's like a lot of like really like tiny little factions like within the horse world, and there's a lot of different disciplines and types of horses and just areas and everything. So I grew up actually outside of where this, like probably 10 minutes away from where this book is based, which is Rancho Santa Fe, California. And I actually like grew up across the street from a horse stable. Like there was a horse stable across the street from my backyard, like by chance kind of, right? And then I guess my grandfather also worked in the horse racing world, but he was in the betting side, so not like actually with horses. So that's like my only kind of, I guess, the reason I started riding is because of like proximity,
Yeah.
But I just got super into it like as a kid, and I started working at the horse stable when I was really young. So there's like a common thing that's called like a working student, where you're sort of like a volunteer at the horse stable, and it's like free childcare for parents. And it's like,
right.
I got to be around horses. So I loved it. So I basically like lived at the barn as a kid. Like I would be there like from the end of school until dark. And then like on the weekend, it was closed on Sunday, but all day Saturday, had like my groups of friends and everything that we were just obsessed with horses. And then, when I went off to college and everything, I stopped riding, and I actually stopped riding for like 10 years because I moved to London. I could not even afford like to look at a horse. I mean, the problem, I guess, with the horse industry is that it's really inaccessible. So it's like, if you can't afford to have your own horse, your only really way to be around horses is to work in the industry. So after my husband died, I went actually to a dude ranch in Utah, like with my family, like by kind of just for like a family reunion. And they had horses, and I got to I went and rode and did like the morning roundup and all this kind of stuff. And I just really reconnected with it. And I was like, you know what, like, this is what I want to be doing. Like, I feel like I could I felt like this was where my life was like kind of pointing me to try to find like kind of some sense of like happiness and sort of, all of that. So I was still living in London, and I started applying to all these dude ranches. And I got a job at this dude ranch in Northern California. And that's actually like ended up being the inspiration for If I Disappear, which was like my first adult novel that came out a few years ago. And then I worked there for a little bit, didn't really work out. So I ended up going and working at a barn in Orange County. And I was actually I was teaching, I did horse camps and riding lessons. And so I would teach sort of like the children of like the rich and famous, let's say. And that's kind of where a lot of the inspiration for this book came. And then I guess went over to LA and did the same thing in Los Angeles. Yeah, and that's kind of where the germ of like inspiration for this book came, just because I would observe the kind of different dynamics between parents and their children. And like I would, see these parents who had sort of grown up and not had this kind of access to horses, who then would bring their kids and want them to have it. And maybe the kids didn't have necessarily the same dream. And it was just interesting to me, because I feel like, I don't think it's like a bad impulse to want your kids to have the things that you never had, and to have this kind of thing that you think is so important and magical and special. But at the same time, as the child, it can become kind of dangerous, So it's interesting. I love, these kind of questions of like,
Well, and it's such a prevalent theme in the book and in the world, where parents live vicariously, right? It's like,
Sure.
this woman, she absolutely wants her children to be these fabulous riders, and she has one daughter who's interested, but the mother's interest actually sort of deters her from wanting to ride, right? Because your mother's like in your face all the time, and then the younger daughter is like not that interested, and there's the mother pushes them. It is a really, and there's so much interesting things also about this family, because they're kind of nouveau riche, right? They're not sort of old money, or they're really recently wealthy, and sort of the mom thinks like, okay, well, now that we're wealthy, we can spend this money on on these incredible horses, and the price tags on these horses, which I'm sure there are horses that there's horses that cost way more, but the price tags on horses make it a little bit, it's like, do you want to have a home or do you want a horse?
Yeah. I mean, that is like one thing, like I somewhat inflated, because it's hard to predict, I guess, like how the market would go. But I mean, I think hundreds of thousands is super believable. But I also do feel like I was like, well, it's totally possible that the trainer would also inflate the price, just knowing how much money they have and how little they know. But then at the same time, like for you to find a horse that could do like compete at the top levels, and then also like carry around some little, kid who doesn't know what she's doing. I mean, that horse would be worth $1 million. Like, I don't even know if it exists.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Anyway, that is so interesting. I mean, so in the, there's a lot about this book is also about sort of the impact of money, right? And I think that's something you sounds like you've had some experience with in your real life, and sort of the way it changes relationships, not just the kids, but also like the parents. And the parents, the Parker parents are also dealing with some difficulty. And so Heather, the mom, is sort of reflects on the fact that this money is both a blessing and a curse. And I'm curious about your thoughts on that, because that's a big theme in the book as well.
Yeah. And then like my last book was about money as well. And what's like weird, because people are always like, why are you writing about this? But it's like, I think that like on a subconscious level, so before I started like having success with books and stuff, like I was living like below the poverty line with my husband for like a decade. And then like I have made a lot of money through this, like, I mean, obviously I'm not a freaking millionaire or a billionaire, but like compared to where I was, like I'm, it's like, to me, it's crazy. And I think that I'm really uncomfortable with it. And I feel like that's why I'm always writing about it, almost like that it's like a horror thing, because it is really weird to go from like, and especially like I was in my 20s, like that's such like a kind of time that establishes like how you view the world. And to go from one extreme to the other, it is really like, it's weird. There is like a side of it that's, I think it's kind of scary and surreal, So I think that's what draws me into it. And I feel like, because I was wondering, I'm like, why do I keep writing? Do I not like having money? Like, what's happening?
Well, I noticed that because, your last book, Good Rich People, is very, it does have it has that similar theme. But I think there's something about that it's really interesting. I think even when you have money, if you haven't had money, there's the fear of not having money again. And it's such a weird asset, right? Like, and especially, I mean, as a writer, my God, like, you and I both know it's like, it can be feast or famine. So you're like, how do I maintain,
well, that's that, it's coming, and you're always just thinking, okay, is this going to be the year when everything starts to go downhill? Like, is it like, do I need to be prepared? What am I I'm always thinking like that. But then
Right.
there's another side of me too. Like this is like, that goes, gosh, I really wish that I didn't have so much and I had to actually struggle and do stuff, because sometimes things feel too easy and it can feel kind of boring, which God, I mean, I shouldn't even say that, but
I
there's a
know, knock on
weird
some
side
wood.
to it too, where it's no matter where you are, you're going to be like, I don't want to be here.
It is, it is fraught. And you see, and the book is another great example of that, is that the wealthiest people, and, I've had experience with them, in where I grew up. And it is like sometimes the wealthiest people are the least happy people you will ever meet in your whole life.
Sure.
So there's this other idea is that, money provides security to a certain point, of course, but the Parker family is way beyond that. And
there's a point, exactly what you're saying.
And they're not that happy, right? None of them is they have moments, but none of them is like in a great place. So let's talk about the Mean Girls, because the other thing I love about this book, and of course, if you've been a girl, which we both have, that there are mean girls everywhere, but these mean stable girls, and you can totally see why Vida is she's the sort of, she did what you did, right? She grew up in the barn. She's not from a wealthy background. She basically is there because she works there, but she gets to ride the horses, and she's desperate to be really, really good and wants to be trained by the best. And she has such a wonderfully nuanced personality, right? I mean, her hurt, her internal pain comes out in these just vicious, she's hurting, and that's why she's so kind of lovable, even though she's so also awful, right? So I was, from that perspective, like, what was it like for you when you're like you're kind of living, like you said, not even not a wealthy, even comfortable life, and these people have just, what does it make you feel like?
Oh God, I mean, that's
from. I know. Well,
so for Vita's character, I mean, I definitely I think in the book, like she does, like they did have money at one point. So it's definitely not something that I really experienced. Like they're kind of on a downturn. Yeah. But when I was younger, I was like in that kind of position where I was the only girl, or not the only girl, but I felt, all my friends had more money than I did, right? Yeah. They owned horses and leased horses, and they were like an only child, or like one of two, or, and I'm like one of nine. So I definitely tried to, kind of like harness like a little bit of that kind of feeling of just like the frustration, because when I, as a horseback rider, like I never got to achieve remotely what I wanted to, because I was held back by money. And I kind of got to the point at my barn where I was like too advanced for it, but I couldn't go anywhere else because I was working there, and my payment was my job. Like the payment was me getting to ride horses, and the job was me riding horses. So I kind of tried to kind of channel that into that character, because I think it's important, like no matter if it's sort of like the sort of villain or whatever it is, that you have some kind of connection to them, so that they feel like a real person, and you can understand where they're coming from. Yeah. And then I guess like for the Vita as well, like I kind of tried to set up this sort of paradigm where Heather's like the mother, and she's trying to decide how much sort of control and how much she should push her kids. And she has on the one side Kieran, who tries to control everything, and then on the other side it's like Pamela, who lets Vita do whatever she wants. And that's like, I think that's, to me, that I like having stories that are built around a question that doesn't have an easy answer. And I feel like the idea of how much you should influence your kids is a tough question, because I think people are tempted to go, let them be themselves, but it's like, you really can't do that, because they need somebody to guide them. Otherwise they're going to, go to other kids or parents or whatever. So there is always some element that you can't just like sit there and be like, just go ahead, do whatever you want.
Right.
You got to teach them something.
It's against our nature. I mean, it's really a struggle. I have, two now grown kids who are 23 and 21. And it is really a struggle to be like, you got this, because you watch them make missteps, which they have to make, right? We all have to make missteps, but you kind of think, oh, if I tell them about that, then I can protect them, but you can't really protect them. And it's just it's impossible.
Well, no matter what you do, there's going to be a positive and negative consequence to whatever your action is. So it's like that kind of like having to, that kind of weight and responsibility is just so hard. Like I can't even imagine. Like with my dogs and my horse, I can't. Like, every day I feel bad for something that I like unintentionally did.
Right. Well, that's what we say. I mean, you can you're going to mess them up in different ways, but you're still going to mess them up. Everybody probably needs therapy. It's just the way it goes. But the other thing I love about, the dynamic in the barn is that threesome. The girl threesome is, these young girls, right?
Oh yeah.
It's Vita, and then it's oh God, I'm gonna mess up on the names.
Effie,
Yeah, and
right?
then
Yeah. And
and then
Maple.
yeah, Maple,
Yeah.
Maple, who is the
Yeah.
Parker daughter,
Sorry,
and
my dog's crying.
and the least I don't hear it, so
Okay,
I
good.
know mine will start to bark at some point, but she's Maple is the sort of the Parker daughter who's not particularly you know interested necessarily in writing and is a little bit awkward, right? I mean, she's
Yeah.
but trying to
Yeah.
gain some sort of power and trying to please her mother. And meanwhile,
Yeah.
the other two girls are much better writers. Vita is definitely the diva of the group.
Yeah.
And there's that like 2-on-1 that happens, right? There's the sort of that is such a
Oh my God.
natural.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always was like, when my daughter was growing up, I'm always like, threesomes are really hard. Like, get a fourth, or make it a bigger group. But she always ended up in a threesome, and I was like, this is always going to be really, really hard. So I thought you did such a great job with those girls. Really,
That's
really.
so funny. I never thought of like the whole idea of it being three.
Oh,
That's interesting. But yeah,
yeah.
I kind of like based that when I was growing up, it was in those years that Maple's in where it's like that transitional period from elementary school to junior high, which I think is just when everything just goes crazy. And
So
there's so
brutal.
many, right?
Yeah.
Yes. It's like everyone just changes overnight and like they're like, suddenly very mature.
Yeah.
And I had like this sort of girl group of six. We called ourselves the Barn Kids, and we just hung out at the barn, and we were like this sort of like a clique. And sometimes we were really. I'm sure that for me, it seemed like for me, it felt like we were all best friends and we were all so close. But it's like it was just us only. So it's obviously there was people on the outside that probably felt a different kind of way about it.
Yeah.
So it's just
Yeah.
interesting how you get these groups, and man, like we were savage. Like I was reconnecting with them over this book. And my
Yeah.
friend like posted this drawing that one of us had made for the other girl, and it had pictures of all of us and listed all of what our faults were, I guess. So it was like Eliza has big ears, like X has this. It was like, dang, like that's
God,
harsh.
that is so
But
harsh, right? Yeah, it's
yeah,
just,
it's like we thought. I mean, it's a joke, like we thought it was
I
funny at the time,
know.
I guess. But really, it was like trying to like frickin', I don't know, sort of destabilize people.
I mean, it is. It's a power move, right? I mean, it's whoever you never want anybody to be too confident because then you feel less confident. It's just a
Yes.
mess. And I really think it's interesting to read about, I mean, young women looking back and being like, wow, that was a brutal time. And it is a brutal, brutal time. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate that. And, I mean, I think it's so interesting too that you talk about, like you said, that horse racing really has this incredible barrier to entry. You can only get
Mm.
so far unless you
Yeah.
find, and it doesn't sound like, I mean, there's not like I mean, maybe there's scholarships available for kids who,
Well,
but
I
there's,
mean, I think that the internet has changed so much of what everything is. And like, I
yeah,
think now there's more like accessibility. But like I said, like this, okay, so in my sort of view of the horse industry, it's like a lot of it relies on people who are like willing to who just for the sake of being able to be around a horse are going to work for minimum wage, not have lunches, work like around the clock just to be around horses. So it's like, yeah, you can have opportunities where you can go be an intern for a trainer or something like that. But like the competition to be a rider, like a professional rider, is very high. I mean, it
right,
depends also where you are, like based on where the industry is. But it's like, yeah, there's maybe like you could have access now with the internet to like an internship and you could go live somewhere, but you're going to be working your bum off. You're not going to have probably any benefits. And it's kind of like a short-term thing because it's like there's injuries and health and it's how long can you really do that for? And then I
yeah,
also feel like, where I live in Southern California, like a lot of the barns, like the barn that I grew up riding at is closed down. Like a lot of the barns that made stuff more accessible are closing down. And then you can see some money going into like the higher level of the sport, but that's a very different thing. So
right,
it is
right.
it's kind of sad to me the way that I think that the equestrian sort of like, I guess like lifestyle is sort of diminishing and becoming, I think, less accessible in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like for a long time, we talked about that with golf. Like golf was because of the club fees and all that stuff. But this is like golf on steroids because good Lord,
yeah,
it's
but
just
similar though.
Yeah.
I guess, like, yeah.
It's this, yeah, the access is really, really hard. And it does sound like, I mean, I remember and we had gone, I've been to my family, my dad loved to ride horses, and we would used to go to a dude ranch in Wyoming. And, you'd meet the wranglers and the crew that worked there. And they were, they loved those horses. But it was so super seasonal. I mean, you're only there for this amount of time. It's just and then what do you do in the winter? I mean, it's a really hard life. And obviously we have a lot of rodeo. I'm in Montana, so a lot of rodeo folks too. Same thing, right? I mean, that's and talk about injuries. I'm sure. I mean, I'm not going to say there's more injuries in rodeo than equestrian, but it seems like I've seen some of those guys fall and think, oh my God, I don't know how they're going to get back up. It's a brutal business. So I have to ask, because I did not know you were one of 9. So that is so interesting to me. So you said doesn't sound like all of your family was writers. You kind of got into it. Where do you fall in the line?
I am the oldest girl. I'm the 4th child.
Okay.
And a couple of my sisters rode here. Like they took a few lessons here and there. And I think they did some, like in college, they had like a horse class and stuff, but none of them are really into it. Like
you are,
I would say. Yeah.
Are there other writers among you?
My sister-in-law is a really successful writer. Kirsten White.
Okay. That is so funny. I love that. Well, that's a lot of children. Your mom is a brave lady. I love that.
My mom, she likes to be doing stuff. She likes to be busy, man. So she made herself as busy as possible.
She did. And how far apart are you start to finish?
Well, it was over 10 years. So a child every year, and then there's twins at the end. And then now, because we're older, and so my family's Mormon, a lot of them are married and with children. So I think that they have 25 maybe grandkids on. So.
Wow. Well,
a lot of babysitting.
that's fun. I mean, as long as your mom likes chaos and busyness, she's set herself up for that. So tell me, I want to talk a little bit about your process. Are you somebody who plans out a book, outlines it? Are you a pantser?
I feel like it's kind of depends on the story, like what works and what doesn't. I have a hard time with outlines because I feel like can you hear my dog barking?
You can let him in. Is he wanting to be in?
Yeah. One sec.
Okay, sure.
Come here. You're okay. Relax.
Yeah,
sorry.
No, that isn't even unusual. Sometimes I get one that's literally barking in the room. I could barely hear him, but I know how it is when you're but my dog is barking and I'm distracted and I just want to let him in. So he's so sweet. What's his name?
Her name's July.
Oh, July. Cute.
Might be a bit worse in here with the tail. What was the question again? Sorry.
No, we were just talking about sort of how your process for writing. Are you?
Sorry. Okay, so I honestly find when I outline, I feel like the writing feels really dead and forced, and it just doesn't pass muster. Basically, I just get turned around.
Totally.
So I feel like it depends on the story, what works and what doesn't. I honestly I'm trying to find stories that I feel have a plot baked into them so that it makes it a little bit easier for me to kind of know where I'm supposed to go. I mean, I always have a general arc, but this book I completely rewrote. That's her wagging tail hitting the desk. Sorry.
You're fine.
This book I completely rewrote. We went through so many edits. I can't even this was probably the most intense writing process I've ever been through. Oh my word.
She's so cute. I almost feel like we should get a horse in the house too, so we can get the full picture of what it's like to be Eliza.
Here's my vacuum.
But okay, so that's interesting. So you wrote it and then it was an editorial letter?
So, I mean, my poor editor. So, okay, I'll explain it now. Looking back, I feel like I can kind of see what went wrong so much better. But okay, so I sold this book on 3 chapters and a pitch, right? And so I wanted to make the most possible happen in those 3 chapters so they'd buy the book. Right. So in the original version, someone died in the first 3 chapters, like 2 people had sex, like it was just a lot.
Right.
And so then I'm trying to make the book work with that beginning, because you think that's what they bought, which is such like a dumb, don't think that way. As long as you make it better, it's fine, you know, but it's hard to take that kind of risk to change something.
Of course.
So I'm trying to make this book work, but when so much happened at the beginning, and then I fast forwarded 2 years, it was like impossible to keep the tension. And like, it felt just like almost like and when someone dies at the beginning, it's like a grief book, which is really hard as a thriller.
Yeah.
You know, and then it was also like the mystery's cold, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I didn't want to write a mystery really. So I really like put myself in this position that was bad. So we were going back and forth trying to make this work, kind of going in circles. And it got to the point where I was like, okay, I know they're not happy with it because they keep turning it back to me. And now I'm not even kind of, I was like, I don't even really like the direction this is going. So I had this total freak out, was like, you know, talking to all my author friends, like, what do I do? Like, I don't want to put out a book I don't want. Like, it was just like, I'm going to lose my career. Everything's over. Like, I'm very dramatic.
No, you're actually, but that's like such a normal, I feel like that is what every author does.
Okay,
in that situation. You're right there with the rest of us.
Hopefully it makes people feel better. So I was like, how can I make this work? And I really tried to look at what was holding me back. And I was like, I can't have the death at the beginning. I need to have people being introduced to this world, you know, like just make it as easy as on yourself as you can.
Yeah.
And so then I wrote like 10,000 words, sent it to my editor, and I was like in such a state of like lunacy. I was like, oh, you gave me 6 weeks to kind of do these edits. So I thought it'll probably take me 2 weeks to do those. So the other 4 weeks, I'll just rewrite the book and you can decide what you want. You know what I mean?
That's
not thinking, because you're trying to do what you're supposed
to
do. Because I'm such like you know, I'm like, I want to do my job, and we're all in this thing together. But also at the same time, I was like, felt like it's hard you feel like you're like jumping ship, but you're really not. And she was like, read the beginning, was like, yeah, go for it, you know, because she's freaking great and like lets me do that kind of stuff. So yeah, then I rewrote the whole book, sent that to her, and then did a major edit on that one.
I know. I'm like, how do we avoid? I'm literally, every book I've written there's at least 40,000 words that has to go. And I'm always like, so how do we do this so that I'm not writing like a book and a half? I would really love to figure out how to not write a book and a half. But you know what? My 16th book came out yesterday, Eliza, and I'm still doing it. So
no, don't come on. Okay, the book I'm writing right now, I think I'm not going to have to, but I don't know, because I got like my first edit letter, but we'll see. I haven't got the other one yet. She might chicken out.
Well, I'm sure, you know, I do think you get better about some things, and then some of it is just the process. Like you said, every book is different, and that is so hard, right?
It depends on the idea, I think. And it's like at the end of the day, you always, like, if you need to do more work, you always want to. You never want to be like, oh, but I don't want to write 10 books, so I'm just going to, you know, hand over a subpar book. No, you know, it's actually like, and it's great to have an editor that's like willing to do that with you. Yeah, like that's actually like a humongous blessing to have someone who's like, I'm gonna like put in all this work that we're gonna make this so much better. And it really is way better than it was.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. And you want that for the people who loved your earlier books. You don't want to disappoint them. There's so many layers of it. It's for your pride. It's, you know, it's your career. Yeah. And it is a tricky business. So I totally get that. Well, can you tell us a little bit about what's coming next for you?
Yeah, my next book is like totally different than this one. I always like to do stuff that's really different than, you know, the last thing. I like to challenge myself. This one, and so because this book was very character based, I was like, I want to do something that's really plot and twist and da. So basically it's about these 2 like contract killers in Europe who kind of like meet on a train. They don't know, obviously, that the other person is a contract killer. They like have sex, then they separate from each other because like he was actually shot earlier in the day. So he like passes out in the bathroom. So they like don't, you know, and she thinks that he's just sort of like disappeared. then it sort of fast forwards to 6 months in the future. They like meet again by chance in Versailles, like by chance. So they think, right? But really one of them has been assigned to kill the other one. And then it sort of like just takes off from there, that it's like this kind of like romance thriller, twisty, going through Europe. Like it's just super heightened and like really fun.
So fun. I love that. Now I hope you go over there for research. My God.
Well, I lived in London, and then when I
Yes.
was younger, I did like, I was like, I don't even know if they have this stuff anymore, but I did like this like Eurail pass thing,
Oh,
where you
yeah.
can just go on any trains, right?
Yeah.
And so I've been like all over there, and so I really like, it was like nice to be able, like, like through a book, like you go back.
Yeah.
So it really felt like I was like able to go back there, and it
So
was just
fun.
like, I think that Europe, it's so romantic. Like I love the train, like the whole train thing, So like in
Me
this book, they
too.
like go to France and Spain and Italy and and England, and it's like it just was like so nice to pretend.
My daughter graduated from college 2 weekends ago, and she just landed in Granada last night.
Aww.
And she is there for like almost actually over 5 weeks with a girlfriend doing exactly
awesome.
that. I know.
Yes,
I'm like,
just like never leave. Well, except for I really did never leave, and it actually like gets to a point where you're just like,
how did you
forget
make that
about
work? How did you stay in London?
Oh, I mean, it was a lot. I had, initially I was on, they used to offer, I don't know if they still do, student work visas where if you were in college, you could get 6 months working. So I did that twice.
Yeah.
Then I went to college, then I got married. And the only time it was ever easy to get a freaking visa is when I was a widow. That was the only time that they were like, oh yeah, here you go. Like, but also maybe because I had some money then, because I had sold some books. But yeah, it's interesting, man, because it's hard. It's like you have to really be committed, because there was a time when I was in school, it was in the middle of like 2 semesters when something went wrong with my visa and I had to go home and kind of apply and wait.
Right.
Unless you're going to pay the extra money, which I couldn't. You have to kind of just wait around and just like hope for the best. And then I came back.
Right. Well, that's but that is such an adventure, and that opportunity, you'll never, you'll never forget that time. I think it's so valuable. And I think it's really valuable to see other parts of the world, because in my opinion, there's a lot of places in Europe that are doing things a lot better than the way we're doing them. So
gosh. Well, like the NHS, like, I mean, the healthcare system here is it's appalling and revolting and like I can't even believe it. Like I literally went to like the dentist 3 weeks ago and I was like, this is like fraud. Like this is like conning. Like I don't get it.
Yeah.
How is this allowed?
True. Yeah, I know. And so my daughter's like, she studied in Prague, and she's like plotting about how she can figure out how to live in Prague. And I'm like, it works for me. Like, you go, girl. That's awesome.
There are like, you can, you just got to be persistent and kind of like, look, because there's there's ways, I think. Yeah. School.
It's cool.
Work,
yeah, exactly. It's super cool. But I love that. And I'm envious that you got to live there. That is so amazing. So do you have a title for that next book yet? Sometimes those
it's like a working title, right? So right now I think it's called It Had to Be You. That's like, but it'll probably change, who knows?
Yeah, isn't that, I know, but I love that.
But it's like I wanted to do something that was just like a romance, but was also like just crazy and had a lot of, romantic scenes.
I love that. Oh, I can't wait for that one. And that'll be out sometime late 24, early 25. Is that?
Yeah, I think like maybe like September of next year or something. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I know. Everything changes.
Hoping for the best.
I know, exactly.
I'll probably have to rewrite that whole book. It'll be completely different.
I hope not, because it sounds fabulous. So Girls and Their Horses is out June 6th, which is super exciting. And with actually our podcast will launch. This will go live on that day. So today is the day, as you're listening to this, that Eliza's new book is out, Girls and Their Horses, and it is super fun. I mean, I think I love to read a book where I'm so engrossed in the world that I don't know anything about, that it just adds a whole nother layer to sort of the fun page turningness of the book, which probably isn't a word, and I'm a writer, so that's too bad. But anyway, so thank you so much for joining us today, Eliza. It was so fun to talk to you. I loved your book. I'm looking forward to the It Had to Be You, or whatever that is.
Yeah, whatever happens.
Whatever it's called in the future. I love the
Yeah.
idea of, and then who doesn't love to read about assassins? That's super, super
Oh my
fun.
God, yes. I wanted to like do the craziest thing I possibly could. So it's over the top. But
So
yeah.
fun. So fun.
Thank you so much for
Absolutely.
having
It was
me. This has been a
great, great.
pleasure.
Yeah, great to have you here. So fun. So fun to hear about your stories and all. And for those of you listening, this is Killer Women with Eliza Jane Brazier and her latest book, Girls and Their Horses, which is her third book, right? Third? Is this 3 or 4?
Yeah, third adult novel. Yeah.
Third adult novel. And if you missed Good Rich People, that was the one that came before that. And that's also a fabulous one. I've read those two. I missed the first one, but I'm gonna have to go back. So, and then we will see you. We will see you next time. Thank you for joining us. Bye.
Thank you so much.